Okay, so picture this. A country's entire university system is struggling. And then, in just about 10 years, it goes through a boom so massive that the whole world starts calling it a miracle. Now, this isn't some hypothetical scenario. It's the real story of how Pakistan basically hit the reset button on higher education with its Higher Education Commission. Right, so that's the big question, isn't it? How do you actually fix a system that's broken? You know, when the funding is all over the place and the policies change every time the wind blows, where do you even start? Can you really engineer a massive leap forward? Well, Pakistan's experiment from the early 2000s gives us a really powerful and, yeah, pretty controversial answer. To really get a handle on just how big of a mountain they had to climb, we've got to go way back to the beginning. In 1947, when Pakistan was founded, it had just one single university for the entire population. That's it, one. That's the starting line for this whole incredible journey. All right, so let's dive into our first section, a system that was desperately in need of reform. I mean, building a modern education system pretty much from scratch was never going to be easy. For more than 50 years, the road to change was long, it was winding, and it was filled with a lot of frustrating false starts. And look, the ambition, it was there right from day one. Back in 1947, Pakistan's founder Muhammad Ali Jinnah said that the nation's entire future depended on its education. So the vision was crystal clear, but actually making it happen, that would turn out to be a struggle that lasted for decades. When you look at this timeline, a pattern just jumps right out at you. It's just this constant churn, right? You've got 5-year plans in the 50s, a new commission in the 70s, ideological shifts in the 80s, and then a whole mess of competing policies in the 90s. Every new government brought a brand new plan, but without consistent money or follow-through, the system was basically just spinning its wheels. And the result of all that? By 2002, the system was, for all intents and purposes, broken. The old University Grants Commission was just overwhelmed. It was underfunded, and it just couldn't keep up. It was pretty clear that just, tweaking things here and there wasn't going to cut it. A radical change was needed. And then, in 2002, that radical change actually arrived. This is the moment where the whole story just takes a sharp turn. The old way of doing things was completely tossed out, and it was replaced by something new, something powerful, and, most importantly, something autonomous. It was called the Higher Education Commission, or HEC. And here's the really crucial part, the game changer, really. It was set up to be an autonomous body, totally independent of the Federal Ministry of Education. This was specifically designed to shield it from political meddling and give it the real teeth it needed to push through massive, long-term reforms. And who they picked to lead it sent a huge message. The government brought in Dr. Atta-ur-Rahman, a very highly respected scientist. This wasn't just another bureaucrat. It was a signal that this whole thing was going to be driven by research, by data, and by global academic standards. His mission was enormous. Literally reboot the entire system. Okay, so the HEC is created, it's got a powerful new leader, so what happens next? Well, what happened was nothing short of an absolute explosion of growth. The next decade saw a transformation so rapid, so dramatic, that academics and observers all over the world started to sit up and take notice. And you don't have to take my word for it. The numbers are just staggering. Just look at this chart. Before all these reforms, Pakistan was putting out maybe 600 international research papers a year. Fast forward just 5 years later, and that number skyrockets to over 4,300. That is a 7-fold increase in just half a decade. It's wild. Now, to really put that into perspective, let's look at the before picture. Think about this. For the first 55 years of the country's history, not a single one of its universities had ever been ranked in the top 600 in the world. Not one. A big, fat zero. And now for the after. Just a little over a decade later, 7 Pakistani universities had broken into the rankings for the top 250 in Asia. So this wasn't just some internal metric. The rest of the world was recognizing this massive shift was happening. So how on earth did they pull this off? Well, a huge part of the strategy was simple. Invest in people. A lot. The AGC sent over 5,000 PhD scholars to study at top-tier universities around the world. The whole idea was to build this new generation of brilliant academics who could come back home and lift the entire system up from the inside. This transformation was so profound that international academics who'd been watching Pakistan for years were just stunned. Wolfgang Wolter, a German professor, he summed it up perfectly. He just said, a miracle happened. He called the HEC's early years the golden period of Pakistan's higher education. But here's the thing about miracles. Creating one is hard, but keeping it going, that's even harder. The HEC's rapid ascent wasn't without conflict. The next phase of its story was marked by a lot of political turbulence and some really fierce debate, which just goes to show how difficult it is to maintain that kind of radical momentum. And the biggest challenge came from a major constitutional change, the 18th Amendment. This was all about shifting power from the central government out to the provinces. And for the HEC, this was an existential threat. The big question became, should this powerful central body be broken up? Should each province just run its own show? I mean, this threatened the very national structure that made all the reforms possible in the first place. And this debate wasn't just political. You had prominent academics with fiercely opposing views. On one side, you had physicist Pervez Hoodbhoy, a critic, arguing that these reforms had just made higher education more expensive. But on the other side, you had scientist A.Q. Khan, who staunchly defended the HEC, calling it a strategic organization that was vital for the nation. So imagine being the HEC's second chairman, Javed Lagari. You're right in the middle of all these storms. He fought fiercely to protect the HEC's independence from political pressure, and at the same time, he took a really hard line on academic integrity, famously leading the investigation that exposed dozens of sitting parliamentarians for having fake degrees. So after the boom and the turbulence, where does the HE stand today? Well, it has absolutely cemented its place as a core part of Pakistan's academic and national infrastructure. It has a whole range of responsibilities that impact pretty much every single student in the country. So what does that actually mean? What does the HEC do day to day? Well, a whole lot, actually. They're the ones who verify your degree so you can work abroad. They run the big national scholarship programs. They're behind the Prime Minister's laptop scheme. They're the watchdog making sure universities meet quality standards. Its work impacts nearly every student and researcher in Pakistan. And its role is still highly strategic. Today, the HEC is a key player in Pakistan's big push to build a modern, technology-driven knowledge economy. It's actively advising the government, directly connecting what happens in universities to the nation's future economic goals. And all of this brings us right back to our big question. The story of the HEC is this powerful case study in what focused, independent reform can really achieve. It kind of suggests that a massive, big push from the top might be a key ingredient for building a knowledge economy. But it also leaves us with an even tougher question, doesn't it? Once you create a miracle, how do you make it last?